Study Session 13. Military Rule. Introduction. Military intervention in politics is not only seen as an aberration, but also as a kind of action capable of undermining the profession of the military. In this study session, we are going to focus on the meaning of military rule by defining the concept. Thereafter, we shall look at other issues in the discourse on military rule, such as causes of military intervention, characteristics, structure, advantages and disadvantages of military regimes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to define the term military rule, enumerate the causes of military intervention in politics, identify the characteristics or features of military regimes, describe the structure of military administration, and compare the merits and demerits of military rule. Meaning of military rule. The military has not only got involved in the political process by overthrowing or removing the constitutional civilian administration, but it has also attempted to make itself superior to the political class, that is, the elected politicians, which it's supposed to be subservient to. The military rule is an aberration, an illegitimate form of government. Even in countries where the military has become almost a permanent feature of politics, military rule is still considered as an aberration and symptomatic of a malfunctioning political system. Military rule was not expected to last long. Once the rescue operation was complete, the military should return to the barracks where they belong and leave the governing to civilian politicians. The problem, however, was that although military officers accepted this rationale, military rule usually became self-sustaining. Berkheimer defines military government from the perspective of victor-vanquished relation and holds that no proclamation of the part of the victorious commander is necessary to the lawful inauguration or enforcement of military government. That government results from the fact that the former sovereignty is ousted and the opposing army now has control. Yet, the issuing of such proclamation is useful as publishing to all living in the district occupied by those rules of conduct which will govern the conqueror in the exercise of his authority. This is according to Berkheimer in 1914, page 25. Reflecting on the foregoing, Berkheimer defines military government in terms of territorial occupation, where the victorious army becomes the sovereign power consequent to the defeat or abdication or overthrow of the former government. This definition cannot be said to be competent enough in the conceptualization of or giving us the general meaning of military regime. The definition tends to be more international than national because its focal point is essentially drawn towards analyzing the power relation between two opposing state entities, in which one that defeats the other becomes the imagined power whose authority is exercised through its military might. According to one of the foremost constitutional lawyers in Nigeria, Ben Nwabueze, military government can be described as a regime of force. It rules by the barrel of the gun, not by the consent of people. What is of far greater significance is that the authority exercised by the military government does not come from the people. This is according to Nwabueze, 1992, page 5. A military rule is a form of government in which the political power dwells with the military junta. The military officers who staged a coup to overthrow the previous government will choose one of their own, especially the most senior officer among them, to head the state, or as head of state, who will lead the government. Note: virtually all military governments are formed after a coup d'etat has overthrown the previous government. One very different pattern was the one followed by Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq, which began as a one-party state ruled by the Ba'ath Party, but over the course of its existence turned into a military dictatorship, as its leaders donned uniforms and the military became closely involved in the government. Conversely, other military dictatorships may gradually restore significant components of civilian government, while the senior, most military commander still remains supreme political power. In Pakistan, ruling generals Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq, who reigned between 1977 and 1988, and Pervez Musharraf, who reigned between 1999 and 2007, have held singular referendums to elect themselves President of Pakistan for a further several years, as well as general elections voting in civilian prime ministers, that is, political subordinates to the president. Military interventions in African politics were a regular occurrence until the early 1990s, when the wind of change blew across the African continent. One of the reasons for the emergent culture for democratic governance may be the liquidation of Soviet Union towards the end of the 1980s. The ideological crisis that pervaded the entire global landscape was not favorable to African politics, as litany of deaths resulted from coups and counter-coups. Many brilliant soldiers were brutally murdered, resulting from coups and failed coups in Nigeria. Notable among them were late General Thomas Agoyi Ironsi and Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. Several civilians were also killed, including Alhaji Tafawa Balewa, Chief S.L. Akintola, among others. Causes of military intervention in politics. Causes of military intervention in politics include the following. 1. Massive corruption among the ruling civilian elites, pauperizing the mass public. 2. Insecurity of lives and property. 3. Articulation of national interest through facilitation of social coexistence among military solutions. 4. Incidents of massive electoral rigging by the ruling party, causing breakdown of law and order. 5. Reckless application of violence by the ruling party against opposition. 6. Civilian conspiracy by inviting the military to take over the reign of power to settle scores politically. 7. Deprofessionalization of the military through internal and external infiltrations. 8. Over-ambitious military personnel and selfish officers. 9. A response to prevent any disintegration foreseen to befall the nation. 10. Foreign affairs of the civilian administration perceived to jeopardize the interests of the military and probably that of the nations. 11. Corrective philosophy of the military as nation builders. 12. Ethnicization of the military. 13. Underfunding of the military and poor working conditions. 14. Weak political structures. 15. foreign influence and manipulation of the military hierarchy. 16. Injustice in the promotion and recruitment of the military. 17. Incompetent handling of external aggression against the state by civilian authority. Characteristics of military regimes. The distinctive features of military regimes are listed below. 1. The regimes are always autocratic because military leaders tend to believe more in the application of naked force rather than persuasion. 2. The regimes are non-democratic because military government is established through force or simply through the barrels of gun. 3. There is over-centralization of power. Military governments essentially operate within a unitary framework. The military ruler and his serving chiefs at the center enjoy absolute power to govern the country without any clear-cut separation of power, and they make laws for the whole composite units of the state. 4. Military regimes often create a subculture among the civilian population. Here, the civilian population gets internalized with militaristic norms and values of force, which dominate the culture of the military. In Nigeria, civilians started imbibing the culture of militarism due to their experience of the military government. For instance, several civilians now go about with koboko or horsewhip in their cars, a kind of attitude typical of military. 5. Suspension or strangulation of the Constitution. 6. Disregard to the rule of law. 7. Abuse of the fundamental human rights of the common people. 8. Lack of genuine separation of power. 9. There are misrule and bad governance, but not in all cases. This is because there could be some military regimes that were reformative. 10. Rapidly increasing military budgets and militarization. 11. Deprofessionalization of the military. And 12. More often than not, there is poor implementation of fiscal policies. Structure of military administration. 1. Supremacy of the military government. The military government often derives its sovereign power through the principle of might make right. It is a government that comes into force through the barrel of the gun rather than the consent of the people or popular mandate. It is a form of banditry in politics in which legitimacy is enjoyed by the junta through systematic application of coercion that makes people to comply. 2. Decrees. Military government does not make law as obtained in a civilian regime. Laws are made under the military through promulgation of decrees and edicts. And do not forget that constitution must have already been set aside or suspended by the military. In Nigeria, highest military body serves in the capacity to make laws for the entire nation. Such body, like the Supreme Military Council, SMC, or Armed Forces Ruling Council, AFRC, or the Provisional Ruling Council, etc., will have among its members the military head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federation, the service chiefs, the Inspector General of the Nigerian Police, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, as well as the Secretary to the military government. Such body, like the SMC, AFRC, among others, was the supreme law-making body of the country. Council of State. This body does not exist in all military regimes in the world. In Nigeria, such a body was introduced during the military regime of late General Muritala Mohammed. It's an advisory body to the highest lawmaking body, SMC, AFRC, etc. The membership of the council consisted of the Chief of Staff, Supreme Headquarters, who chaired the council, as well as all military governors or administrators in all the states of the Federation. Judiciary. This organ of government is reserved in military regimes. It is charged with its usual responsibility of interpreting law, and it adjudicates in the conflicts between parties. It is headed by the Chief Justice of the Federation. Other members of judiciary may include the judges of courts, especially the Court of Appeal and High Courts of Justice. The military personnel were not members of the judiciary, but sometimes special tribunals may be set up by the military government, which wields some military officers as members. The civil service. The civil service still functions under the military the same way it operates under civilian administration. Under the military, the civil service was headed by the secretary to the military government, who also doubled as the head of service. But since the inception of the Fourth Republic, right from May 29, 1999, the position of the secretary to the government is reserved for the political class, while that of head of service still remains a political appointment reserved for career civil servants. Merits and demerits of military regime. Advantages of military rule. 1. Quick formulation and implementation of policies. 2. Political stability. Absence of political parties can facilitate stability in the polity, because there are no opposition parties struggling for political power with the government. Sometimes, political parties use destructive methods in their struggle for power, which may have adverse implications on the polity. But this does not mean that all is well for military government. 3. Promotion of national cohesion and unity. 4. Economic growth and development. The speedy approach through which the military conducts its affairs can help to develop a nation's economy. 5. Infrastructural development. Due to the autocratic nature of the military regime, slow decision process of the civilian administration may be in the name of due process, is likely to be absent under the military. This is because the government gives priority consideration to the views of the ruler, and the service chiefs and ministers are often participate in government. This is because the government gives priority consideration to the views of the ruler, and the service chiefs and the ministers often participate in government just to rubber stamp the ruler's bids. So, decisions are quickly reached. Contracts are awarded more quickly because there is no parliament in the real sense of it to scrutinize the cost of any project, which may cause a delay or cancel of such contracts for specific reasons. Thus, it is not surprising that Nigeria enjoyed greater infrastructural development under the military than the civilian rule. 6. Rapid response to security issues. The military government can afford to step on anybody's toes because it does not seek people's patronage. Therefore, if any segment of the society or party or community is perceived to constitute a security threat against the government or state, the military political leadership can deal ruthlessly with such, without looking at the implication of such aggression on its loyalty from the people. It is the government that derives its source of its legitimacy through coercion. Again, military government hardly makes any consultation before reaching decisions on security issues. 7. Military regimes often imbue or instill in people ethics of patriotism and discipline. Disadvantages of military rule. 1. It is not democratic and lacks consent of the people. So, it may find it difficult to enjoy any popular, that is, people's support. 2. The regime is always dictatorial. The government rules with decrees and edicts, which are laws that have very little or no popular input. The laws, either good or bad, cannot be contested by the people. 3. The autocratic nature of the government undermines the importance of diplomatic bargaining and joint problem-solving values in the resolution of government-labor conflicts. The military always believes, maybe as a result of their training, that through coercion she can achieve all its aims. Therefore, there is probability that there will be more industrial action or actions, especially strike, under the military than civilian rule, because the military less applies constructive dialogue to resolve industrial disputes. 4. Opposition are always suppressed through structural application of violence. Extreme and regular use of force may sometimes be counterproductive. There seems to be no doubt that the application of naked force against the people since the annulment of the 1993 presidential election by the military leadership of Ibrahim Babangida and subsequently General Sani Abacha regime led to the emergence of various ethnic militias, particularly in the southwestern and Niger Delta regions of Nigeria. The militant activities of ethnic militias like the Oodua People's Congress (OPC), Egbesu and Ijaw Youth Congress, among others, have been a great threat to national security. 5. Excessive military budget and growing militarization. 6. Abuse of fundamental human rights of the people. 7. Non-independence of the judiciary or executive interference in the affairs of the judiciary. 8. Military regimes always impose its will on the people through the use of force rather than influence. 9. Poor planning and implementation of policies because the military are not trained to govern the state and they may lack the technical know-how to effectively lead a complex organization such as a state. 10. There is tendency that government officials under the military will be more susceptible to attitude of corruption than the military rule. 11. Politicization of the military undermines the ethics of professionalism. 12. Political instability. The deprofessionalization of the military resulting from its intervention in politics is capable of promoting political instability. For instance, the 1966 coup in Nigeria was the major factor responsible for the upsurge of the political crisis which snowballed into the civil war between 1967 and 1970. Study session summary. In this study session, you examined military rule, which is described as the government by the military. It usually involves staging of a coup to displace the civilian rulers from power. The countries under military rule are often being governed by decrees and edicts. Many factors are responsible for the interference of the military in politics in Africa and elsewhere. There are various characteristics of military rule, which include dictatorship. The structure of the military administration is different from that of civilian government. In spite of the unconstitutionality of military regime, certain benefits may still be derived from the military rule. Nonetheless, military rule has several disadvantages. End of study session 13. Thanks for listening.